Let's start with diesel engines. They are very popular in Belarus. And you can count them on 2 fingers. Only an inline 4 and a V6 were installed on the W212 body. OM651, the inline turbo and biturbo for OM651 appeared in 2008 and immediately caused problems. Due to the unreliability of Delphi piezo fuel injectors, even in Germany taxi drivers stood up. Daimler quickly took action and corrected the problem. Then it turned out that this engine can surprise with wear on the crankshaft journals and rotation of the liners. This occurs due to a decrease in the efficiency of oil cooling, namely due to a clogged heat exchanger. The control valve for a 2-stage oil pump can also be a problem. It will force this motor to operate only at the lowest pressure level, up to 2 bar, which will not be enough under heavy loads. As a result, Daimler engineers even abandoned this valve. A certain plug must be inserted in its place, A0019905317. In general, the OM651 engine is really good. It pulls amazingly, especially in the E250 version. If you change the oil every 10,000 kilometers and follow the other regulations, then this engine can easily run more than 500,000 kilometers. True, we must not forget that the chain in the upper part of the timing drive can hardly travel so many kilometers without a single replacement. It begins to make noise, and to accurately diagnose its stretching, special ruler W65158911630 is used. By 300,000 kilometers, the plastic intake manifold will almost certainly crack. BlueTEC versions include a urea injection system. Its breakdowns most often occur in winter. This ecological urea injection can be switched off without any problems by software. OM642, the second diesel engine available for the E-Class W212, is a 3-liter V6, which has also been installed on all Mercedes with a transverse engine literally since 2005. This is an absolutely adequate and durable engine. Once every 150,000 kilometers or even less often you will have to refresh the heat exchanger gaskets. The health of the turbine is threatened by the welds of the steel exhaust manifold. Engineers have been trying for years to make a manifold that would not bombard the compressor impeller with weld fragments. In general, if you happen to change the turbine of an OM642 engine with damaged geometry blades or a compressor rotor, then you need to find the latest revision manifolds, a 642-140-0909 and a 642-140-0809, and install them. They can be found at salvage yards, prices from $30 to $40. Yes, you are unlikely to find the number on the manifolds. You need to take it from as fresh an engine as possible. Otherwise, everything is the same as with other diesel engines. Once every 150,000 kilometers, it is worth changing the fireproof washers under the injectors, cleaning the intake manifold of carbon deposits, and cleaning the EGR valve. Don't forget about high-quality oil with the correct tolerance, change antifreeze, wash radiators, and fix oil leaks in a timely manner. And one more nuance: a 2-stage oil pump, A64218028001, controlled by a separate valve, A27818000415, was installed on the OM642 engine for the E-Class W212. All restyled gasoline engines for the W212 body received the same valve and a similar adjustable oil pump. Not to say that this detail caused more problems for the OM642 engine, but there is a risk of a noticeable decrease in oil pressure if the valve gets stuck in the wrong position. The variety of petrol engines in the W212 body is much wider. Some of the gasoline engines manage to drink the blood of their owners and cost a lot of money for repairs. But today, it's as if all existing engines have moved into the livable category. M271, the base gasoline engine for the pre-restyling W212, was the M271 engine. This is the same Ford that on the previous W211 body had a compressor. Here it is without a compressor, but with a turbocharger, which is integral with the exhaust manifold, 27109-03680, direct fuel injection. In general, the M271 engine is considered the least attractive and successful for the W212. There are too many features in it that need to be monitored. The timing chain, A0009931078, needs to be changed every 100,000 kilometers or even earlier if you save on oil. If you drive for a long time with a worn chain, then you will have to change all the timing gears, and even the motor. Next, monitor the oil level. If the oil level begins to rise and the smell of gasoline appears, then quickly change the crankcase ventilation system tube. A 271-018-0729, this consumable needs to be changed every 80,000 kilometers. We keep an eye on the plastic cup, a 271-180-1410, of the oil filter. This part, which costs about $250 for the original, readily warps and begins to leak oil along its gasket. You also need to be able to diagnose the fuel injection pump with a caliper, or at least do such a check with specialized specialists. The TNDV of the M271 motor is dying slowly, but it can be replaced. A27107035001 with a new one before problems begin with the fact that the motor does not pull and only works in emergency mode. The most unpleasant thing is that today a new injection pump, A27107035001, costs about $1,400, used ones from $200. You need to know about the peculiarity of thermostat failure, a 271-200-0315. If the engine starts to warm up for a long time, we recommend opening the hood and touching the hose from the thermostat to the radiator. This hose is located in the front on the driver's side. If the engine has just warmed up to 40 degrees on the scale, and this hose is warm, then you need to change the thermostat. Due to the fact that the engine warms up for a long time, the ECU enriches the fuel mixture, which also leads to fuel getting into the oils. An original thermostat for the M271 motor will cost $200. A replacement will cost about $100. M274. Let's immediately move on to another gasoline turbo 4. The M274 engine appeared on the restyled W212. This is a completely different motor, more reliable. Its timing chain lasts much longer, up to 300,000 kilometers. However, Daimler engineers improved this engine on the fly and, often, at the expense of owners of out-of-warranty cars. For example, the wiring harness, a 274-150-8602, to the solenoid valve that controls the switching of oil pump performance stages, A27818000415, needs to be changed due to fraying of the wiring and subsequent problems. Fortunately, if switching the oil pump stages does not work, then nothing bad will happen to the engine. The pressure in the lubrication system will be sufficient. During diagnostics, an error will be detected in the valve control circuit, before which a message will light up on the instrument panel. Often due to problems with the oil, the engine begins to shake terribly at idle. Wiring to the valve costs about $40. The valve itself is $70. It's worth replacing for a second revision. There is also an unpleasant story connected with the M274 engine, and not only with it, which ends with the replacement of camshafts. The bottom line is that both camshafts have discs on which sensors read their position. So, these discs are simply pressed on. It has been noticed that if the engine sits for a long time or if the phase shifters begin to rattle strongly, the marking discs will turn. Consequently, desynchronization of ignition and injection will occur. The engine will start poorly and there will be errors in the position of the shafts. It is clear that the factory recommendation will have to change both camshafts, a 274-050-3200 and a 274-050-0200, and this is about $2,000 without taking into account labor. Fortunately, there are service stations that can solve the problem. They will correctly align the marking discs on the camshafts and weld them. Phase shifters, a 270-050-6100 and a 270-050-6200, do not like long engine downtime without operation and low quality oil. If there are no problems with this, then these parts will go further than the timing chain. In general, the M274 engine got rid of all these problems in the 2014 model year. Its operation is nothing special. Although it can cause trouble with oil leaks along the front crankshaft oil seal, along the front of the timing case. The thermostat and the heat exchanger located on the front cover of the oil filter cup do not cause problems. The injection pump lasts much longer. But if, after starting a cold engine, the smell of gasoline is felt in the cabin, then you need to change the hose, a 274-070-3500, supplying fuel to the injection pump, M272. Let's move on to V-shaped gasoline engines. Pre-restyling W212 with indexes E300 and E350 received old M272 engines. They have problems with the intake flaps, the timing chain and balancer shaft sprocket wear out after 200,000 kilometers. The chain can even jump. The aluminum surface of the cylinders is not a gift, it is a direct ticket to overhaul and liner replacement if scuffing occurs and the accompanying oil burn and clanging of the pistons when cold. The purchase of a Mercedes with an M272 engine should be accompanied by a thorough diagnosis, including inspection of the cylinders with an endoscope. M276, after restyling, the E-Class W212 received a completely new V-shaped 6, M276. All versions have direct fuel injection. On the 400 models this engine is not naturally aspirated, but bitterbow. The M276 has the same problems with the camshaft timing discs. They can also turn and cause problems with the operation of the engine. Plus, by a strange coincidence, Early versions of the M276 engines did not have any check valves in the oil lines, which is why, after stopping the engine, oil flowed down from the cylinder head and from both chain tensioners. Naturally, Daimler engineers paid for such a mistake. After a cold start, the M276 engines early began to rattle due to loose chains and even caused a meeting of pistons and valves due to a chain jump. It is unlikely that there are living M276 engines today without checked valves. By the way, check valves come in two diameters, A278050400 and A278050330. If you suddenly find yourself installing them, then buy two valves of each diameter and use the appropriate ones. The valves are installed in the oil passages behind the tensioners of each chain. The tensioners also need to be replaced with new ones, A276050250 and A276050260. In fact, such an upgrade should have been made on every M276 engine until 2014. But there is a nuance: under warranty or in the conditions of a dealer service station. Such an operation was carried out in response to complaints from the owner, and not on a mandatory basis. By the way, there are no cast iron liners in the aluminum block of the M276 engine, but there is no alusil either. Instead of all this, spraying a high carbon iron alloy, i.e. the same cast iron. This coating is called nanoslide and it does not create any cause for concern. If the M276 motor was not overheated, then you will not find any scratches on the surface of the nanoslide. Perhaps the only expensive service investment in the M276 engine occurs when replacing the timing chains, when it turns out that the chains have trampled the teeth of the camshaft gears. The gears, of course, are not simple, they are phase shifters, a 276-050-3700 and a 276-050-3700, for $320 for each of the four. The gears can be viewed through the oil filler neck on the right cylinder head of the M276 engine. It is better to look there with an endoscope, because the teeth are naturally covered with a chain on top, and you also need to keep an eye on the dryness of the intake tract. If the inlet pipe is coated with oil from the inside, but the oil separator, A27601000331, and the thin tube, A276018130, of this system need to be replaced. M273 D8 engines remain. Before restyling, the E500 versions were equipped with the old 5.5-liter M273 aspirated engine. It has all the same diseases as the M272 engine. M278, after restyling, it was replaced with a new 4.6-liter V8 with the designation M278. What can you say about him? In essence, this is the same M276 engine with an additional pair of cylinders. In general, the M278 has a bad reputation, and that's based on operating experience of the S-Class. If this executive car only drives in traffic jams and idles for hours waiting for the owner, then the oil quickly degrades, and the engine has scuffed nanoslide coating even after 50,000 kilometers. Therefore, specifically on the S-Class W212, the M278 engine is considered the worst. However, if not the S500, but the E500 does not accumulate engine hours, drives on the highway and gets fresh oil on time, then it is not in danger of scuffing. The only remaining problem is the wear of the phase shifter teeth, and the VKG separator, A27801000431, needs to be replaced. M156, there are still two V8s left for the true AMG versions. The 6.2-liter naturally aspirated M156 was immediately unsuccessful and required many modifications. The original hydraulic compensators begin to click and jam, and stop adjusting the thermal clearances of the valves. This causes the corresponding camshaft lobes to strike the valve stems. And the cam wears out, and the valve can dry out. Specialists install hydraulic compensators, pushers, from the M159 engine, A159050000. True, one such part costs $65, and there are 32 of them. The cylinder head bolts also could not withstand either the load or criticism. The camshaft gears also wore out quickly, causing the timing chain to clank. M157, E63 AMG 525 horsepower, 557 horsepower, 585 horsepower M157 DE55. The new 5.5-liter M157 engine is 80% the M278 engine with a displacement increase to 5.5 liters. If you don't torment him with jostling in traffic jams, don't do inadequate tuning, keep the radiators clean and the pressure in the oil system, then everything will be fine with him. True, the camshaft gears will almost certainly have to be changed along with the timing chain. And it can be driven to the point of scuffing the cylinders. There is nothing to talk about the unreliability of mechanical transmissions. the mechanics on Mercedes work well. Therefore, we move straight to automatic transmissions. And the E-Class had 3 different ones, for 5, 7 and 9 gears, 722.65 straight automatic transmission. The good old and unpretentious 5-speed transmission can only be found with the OM651 diesel engine and the M271 Turbo 4. After restyling, this automatic transmission is a thing of the past. As we noted in a separate disassembly, this is a very durable unit. If you just update its transmission oil and filter every 60,000 kilometers and watch out for some weaknesses, then it will last a million kilometers. This transmission left the E-Class after 2011, 7G-tronic 722.9. Most versions of the Mercedes W212 were equipped with a 7-speed automatic transmission in 2 versions. After restyling, it was equipped with an electric pump to operate with a start-stop system. Separately, we can mention the special versions of the 7-speed automatic for AMG models. This transmission uses a multi-plate clutch instead of a torque converter. On our channel we also have a separate review of the 7-speed transmission of its first modification. Yes, it has become more complex and more delicate than the old 5-motor, but globally there are no serious problems with it. 7G-tronic easily dies due to inadequate operation on powerful versions. It's not so much a matter of engine power, because every automatic transmission from Daimler is adapted to the corresponding engines. Just a series of inadequate accelerations, drifting and everything else without timely maintenance significantly reduces its resource. 9G-tronic 725.0. Since 2014, the E-Class W212 with a diesel V6 and many versions with a turbo diesel 4 have received a 9-speed automatic transmission. 10 years have passed since then and there are no particular complaints about this transmission. Just change the ATF and filter, like on other longitudinal automatic transmissions from Daimler. The filter is accessible after removing the pan. Before raising the car on a lift, let's lift the hood again and take a look at the radiators. They should be clean on all sides. This is especially important for V6 and V8 engines, which in the summer heat can easily lead to overheating and scuffing only because the owner did not spend little money and time on thoroughly washing and servicing the cooling system and removing the radiators. There is not much to say about the transmission and all-wheel drive of Mercedes. With high mileage, the elastic couplings of the cardan shafts crack and must be replaced. The original rear A00041100200 and front A20541100100 cardan couplings cost a little more than $200. If the E-Class W212 is all-wheel drive, then the front driveshaft does not have clutches. In general, 4MATIC all-wheel drive has no problems. The transfer case is literally indestructible, the front driveshaft does not tear off. Yes, BMW owners. 4MATIC is many times more reliable than your X-Drive. The only weak point of the 4MATIC system is the bearing to the front left-wheel drive. At this point the intermediate shaft comes out through the pan. It rests on a bearing into which moisture and dirt inevitably penetrate. As a result, the bearing jams with a creak and turns in its seat in the engine sump. This bearing, A11298000115, simply needs to be preventively replaced every 70,000 kilometers or even more often. Otherwise, it will literally drill out its clip in the pan. You will also have to change the pan. The original bearing costs up to $90. It is better to entrust its replacement to specialized services, because inexperienced servicemen can damage its socket in the pan through their actions. The air suspension optional for most Mercedes E-Classes on the Mercedes W212 has become very reliable. Neither the compressor nor the air struts bother you up to 200,000 kilometers. The system here is of an open type. The compressor, which is located in the rear bumper on the left, takes in air from outside. The air is dried in silica gel. It is advisable to change these moisture-absorbing balls every 2 years. The new compressor, a 212-320-0404, is very expensive, but there is a complete repair kit for it, from the cylinder to the valve block. Non-original compressors cost $200-$300. All E-Class W212 air struts are well protected from external influences by anthers. However, since its front suspension is McPherson strut, so the entire strut rotates along with the wheels. Unfortunately, the support bearings for the front struts, a 212-320-2938, are not detailed separately. Daimler offers to buy the entire rack assembly. The cost of a new one is exorbitant, several $1,000s, but support bearings are very rarely bothered. The cylinders of the front struts are wiped more often, not because of dirt, but because of corrosion that forms on the rod under the air cylinder. The fact is that the anthers of the E-Class W212 air bellows are not sealed. A little moisture gets inside, which does its job where the air bellows wipe the paint. To prevent such a problem from happening, at least once a year you need to lift the anthers of the front air struts from below and clean off the corrosion with sandpaper. Mercedes E-Class W212 is perfectly protected from corrosion and has a great paint job. However, over the years, corrosion appears on the bottom. Near the central tunnel there are U-shaped profiles. They are the first to begin to seriously corrode. And it's better not to turn a blind eye to this and treat the bottom with a product that stops rust rather than masks it. So, at the front, the W212 E-Class doesn't have any upper control arms. The lower arm of the McPherson struts is divided into two rods. In general, the rear and all-wheel drive versions have completely different front control arms and steering knuckles. According to the original, the rear front suspension arms, which come with ball joints at 212 330 2711, cost about $150, and for all-wheel drive, a 212 330 3111, $330. But silent blocks, a 212 333 0314 and a 212 333 0014, cost approximately the same, $70 each. The front links of the front suspension, a 212 330 1911 and a 212 330 3900, cost about $200 and come complete with silent blocks. Only for rear-wheel drive versions, the ball joint for this linkage is detailed separately, a 212 330 0135, and costs up to $70. Of course, for all positions of the suspension there are non-original parts that are 3 to 5 or even more times cheaper. But the original suspension parts last about 120,000 kilometers even on bumpy roads. Front wheel bearings for all-wheel drive versions, a 221 981 0406, are sold separately from the hubs and cost up to $100. And for rear-wheel drive vehicles, the front hubs, a 212 330 0025, are assembled with a pair of bearings. The bearings are double row. This hub, a 212 330 0025, costs more than $200, but lasts a very long time. Both of its bearings can be purchased separately as non-original ones. The internal silent block, a 204 352 1065, of the spring-loaded lever is also sold separately. The rear suspension does not differ depending on the type of drive. There are always 5 levers on each wheel, only 2 original silent blocks, a 205 352 0508 and a 204 352 0027, and 2 points of attachment to the trunnions are sold separately, for about $30 each. 3 upper control arms and a front link, a 205 350 6303, costs $60, $70 each. There are no complaints about the quality of the paint of the E-Class W212 and the quality of the body metal. However, the moldings along the side windows often fade, become cloudy, and become stained on these cars. Depending on the configuration, these moldings are either chrome or black, but both options lose their attractive appearance. Black ones can be covered with black film without any problems. The same can be done with chrome ones. The main thing is to find a suitable film in a chrome shade. The E-Class W212 is not going well with its headlights. On pre-restyling models, the headlights dim and go blind over time, and sometimes fog up. The ignition units of xenon lamps suffer from moisture. On restyled versions, LED daytime running lights appeared in the headlights, which often burned out. Therefore, if you come across a Yashka with traces of opening of the headlights, then do not be surprised. The LEDs in it have probably already been soldered. By the way, fully LED headlights with an intelligent lighting system debuted on the restyled W212. Such headlights at disassembly cost about $900, a 2129063 each. There are also stickers on the headlights with the production date. Of course, the year and month of production of the headlights must coincide with the production date of the car itself. The restyled W212 received rear lights with elegant LED filling. The side lights are made in the form of graceful lines, like guides. Of course, the light guides are illuminated by LEDs. Over time, the soldering of the resistors cracks, so the side lights, the same light guides, stop burning. This happens with literally all restyled flashlights. Fortunately, this problem can be repaired, although you need to open the lamp housings, remove the circuit boards with LEDs and solder the resistors. Many workshops know exactly where to cut the backside of restyled lights. Versions with electric folding mirrors have a problem when unfolding, the mirrors turn outward, as if forward. Such a mirror will have to be disassembled and a new locking sleeve made instead of the cut one. When folding and unfolding, mirrors also begin to creak due to the formation of oxides on their brackets. Parking sensors do not tolerate winter slush that gives way to frost. Replacing non-working parking sensors is a common routine for owners and servicemen. By the way, the choice of parking sensors, a 212-542-0018 is huge, from $20 to $60 for a non-original one. Original ones, $50 a piece, if made to order, and up to $200 for new ones. Original from disassembly, $20, $30. Mercedes W212 was one of the first to introduce fans of the brand to controlling the multimedia system using a selector puck. In this mechanism, a problem occurs when the shaft from the washer itself to the positioner mechanism bursts. Therefore, when rotating the puck, it is impossible to navigate through the menu. No reaction. Usually the shaft breaks due to strong pressure or even hitting the washer. The shaft is plastic and can be easily repaired, glued together with good glue. The interior materials of the Mercedes W212 are good, but there are several characteristic weak points. For example, cracking chrome on the ring around the ignition switch. This decorative element can be purchased separately even from China. Pre-restyling cars have areas in the interior with soft touch coating on the plastic under the center armrest and behind it, around the rear ventilation deflectors. Naturally, this coating will shamelessly peel and scratch. The leatherette on the sidewalls of the seats also often cracks. Mercedes W212 with a 5-speed automatic transmission are equipped with a mechanical steering column lock. The servo drive of this lock is short-lived and usually fails after a mileage of more than 120,000 kilometers. Not only will the steering wheel be locked, but the ignition will not turn on at all. A standard key can only open or close the car. Sometimes if you knock on the steering column, the servo can come to life. In general, the cause of the malfunction is a cheap electric motor. Its commutator becomes dirty or its brushes crack. If the lock is stuck in the locked position, you will have to remove the steering column to dismantle it. If it is stuck in the open position, the mechanism can be removed more easily, but the steering column will have to be lowered. In general, the blocker can be disassembled and the motor in it replaced. But another solution has been invented. You can remove it and install an emulator. There will be no errors or breakdowns, and, accordingly, there will be no steering wheel locking either. In principle, most W212s don't have it. At high mileage on the Eschki, the ignition switch begins to act strangely. It does not allow the engine to start the first time. It is also precisely because of glitches in the ignition switch that the automatic transmission, when driving at low speed, can itself engage in parking mode. If such problems arise, do not delay. Fortunately, all these problems can be easily and relatively inexpensively fixed by specialized services and lock specialists.